What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Mind, Body, and Pockets podcast, where we take lessons learned from people in the marching arts community to help you level up your life. I'm Eddie.
And I'm Paula. And on this podcast, we're going to get to know the individuals who make up the marching arts community. They'll share their experiences in and out of the activity and the mental, physical, and financial lessons they've learned along the way. Here's part 2 of our interview with Bill Muter.
There's like 9 gems in that one right there.
That's great.
And the perspective shift, man, that's so refreshing to hear, because there's so many that would say, oh man, no one knows what the tuba is. And a lot of people fall in that rabbit hole where you just went, oh man, no one knows what the tuba is. I'm going to tell them, here's an opportunity, here's a cool thing. And that's what I respect the most about you, dude. When there is no opportunity, you forge a path, you make a way, and you're able to sell something people didn't even know they needed. Like your lo-fi stuff. We talked about that the other day, but it's like, man, here's a whole nother realm of what's possible, especially in this digital world that no one knew they needed. And then here you come with a solution.
And, you know, being a tuba player in high school, you're not presented with many opportunities in terms of a playing career. And I found this to be true even for me at the time, playing the trumpet. It was almost like you had to pick a side. Well, you're either going to do jazz or you're either going to do classical, and then you're going to go try and win one of those jobs. And if you don't, well, I guess you're going to teach. And that was it, you know, and come to find out there's a plethora of opportunities. And I just think that that's so cool for you, especially someone saying, I'm going to play jazz tuba and I'm going to learn bass. And you're not just getting by playing the bass. Like, he's a beast of a bass player, like nasty bass player. And just to have all these different skills to kind of build your portfolio makes you as a musician more desirable to get those gigs, because you have so many facets to what you can do. So there's something in that as well, just being able to excel at multiple things, whether it be different instruments or whatever your field of choice is. If you have those extra cards in the deck, you're going to be able to get ahead, I think, a little bit faster than somebody who's only one-dimensional.
Totally.
Yeah. And that stuff, I mean, that was something I learned in Blast, because in Blast, they don't hire a tuba player. I was a tuba player that was hired to play tuba 40% of the show, and then I also drummed, and I tossed a flag on stage, and I played didgeridoo, and I danced and I sang, and so that's where I realized, you know, the value for a lot of things is being able to do a lot of that stuff. And I've always been interested in a lot of different things, and you know, when I was younger, I was told by certain people that being interested, like, I want to play the tuba, but then I also want to play bass in jazz band, because that was my link to being in jazz. And I want to play trombone. I want to do this. I want to do this. And when you see like a young kid sometimes be like, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, oftentimes the adult kind of discourages that. Like, oh, well, you got to pick one thing and stick with it. And you know, Paula, that idea of like you're either a classical musician or a jazz musician is so defunct now, because there's very few people that make their career just playing legit classical music or just jazz. Right. It just doesn't happen. And the people that even you think they do that, they also have a studio and they're teaching and they're doing other things as well. So, and you know, the diversity is, to me, the biggest thing to build strength in your career. So all of those things, the sales experience, all that stuff, building a diverse career, it allows you to have strength, especially in times like this, man, with like COVID going on and you lose jobs. You realize you have a lot of strength if your net is wide and far and spread out. And over the years, I've been fortunate enough, a lot of it unknowingly, spreading that net far to create those opportunities. But it's all based on the things that I'd honestly just wanted to do. I was involved in and interested in.
And there's so many layers to that, man. And I'm glad you opened up that can of worms, because there's a lot of people that are afraid to do things like that, man. And you've definitely shown a way to do it. Not saying copy it anyone, but find that gumbo, find that sauce that's going to be your secret to actually take you to the next level. Yeah. Super cool. And it's hard because people see that as such an abnormal life, you know, like, wait, I can just be a freelancer. I can be a, and it is foreign to some people, you know. And like you said, you have the mortgage, you have the house, you have the car, you have the lifestyle, and some people see that and it's like, that's not what I've heard of the starving New York musician, you know, growing up.
Right.
So how do you kind of morph that into a real life, quote unquote, like the things like the mortgage, the house, the taxes, you know, like the things that we don't think about because it's not necessarily that salary government type job.
To me, as an artist, a freelance person, a contractor, the two biggest things that you can learn is sales and like the little things they didn't teach you in high school, taxes, and you know how a mortgage works and how all the like the system. My dad always calls it staying in the system. To me, that's like, and I see this with a lot of young like instructors and teachers in the marching arts. You know, and there's a lot of people I know that follow this podcast that are in a position where maybe they just graduated high school or just graduated college and they're getting that teaching gig and they're a 1099 employee, or not even an employee, they're a 1099 contractor. So they get a check for $500. They're like, sweet, I got $500. I'm going to go out, let's go chill and let's do stuff. And then they get a check, you know, next month they get a little bit more. And then it's just like, you kind of live in this hand-to-mouth lifestyle, which is fun. And I did that early on, but I had to learn, you know, how to manage those things. And I think that is a big part of the game that a lot of the younger instructors I see, unfortunately, kind of veering down the path that I had gone through. I'll tell you guys a story that I haven't told any. I've told maybe a very few people.
Ooh,
but
MVP
publicly,
exclusive. Nice. Exclusive.
So,
let's
only
do
you
it.
hear it here, folks.
Let's do it.
This is water, by the way.
Sure.
Let's do this
But,
though, because that's exactly what we need to do on this podcast: is be that forward thinker or that light for someone else. Of like, hey, let's maybe not do this. Here's what I learned. So please let us know this story.
So check it out. When I mentioned I got off that first blast tour and I was like starving for money. That is like the tip of the iceberg. So I came off, and again, I call this like staying in the system. There is a system. It costs money to live. It costs money to be alive. It costs money to do everything. And when you're young, you don't realize that oftentimes, or I didn't realize it. I knew it's like, okay, you have to pay money to get food and stuff like that. I get that. I have to pay my rent. I get that. But it's the little things that if you let slide, it's way harder to get out. And, you know, I found myself when I had no money, I didn't have a job. And then when you have no money, you know, maybe you're a little bit late on like a cell phone payment. And then all of a sudden that payment ends up being like twice as much the next month, plus $30 in late fees, right? And then, you know, you overdraft once in your bank account and you get like one stupid little iTunes purchase. And then there's another $30 overdraft fee. And I was in this cycle for like 6 months that was just, it was just like a crash and burn cycle. Cause I'd hit my biggest high from a career standpoint and I was like, this is it. And then I realized that wasn't it. It's not a sustaining thing. Like I have to sustain it myself. And I crashed hard, like coming off of that. And I remember I didn't pay my car insurance because I couldn't afford it. And I was young and probably had a couple accidents at that point. So my car insurance was not cheap and I couldn't afford my car insurance. So I let the insurance lapse. And then my birthday came around and I couldn't renew my license because I didn't have insurance. So then my license expired. And then I couldn't renew my tag. And then my license got suspended because I had no tag. And it's like this, it feels like the world is crashing in on you. And this is where I hit the low. I was teaching at Stoneman Douglas High School. And I was working with the marching band and just, you know, making a couple bucks, doing my thing. And I was leaving the school and I pulled out in Parkland, and the police in Parkland pull you over for going like, I was going like 36 and a 30 or something ridiculous. And I wasn't paying attention. I got pulled over and I'm in this old junk beater car with a loud exhaust and like blacked out windows and everything. And I got pulled over and I had no license, had no insurance. My tag was expired. My license was suspended. And I got out. He pulled me on the back of the car, searched me, pulled me over the back of the car, handcuffed me, and I was arrested in front of all of my students at the school. It was mortifying. And luckily luckily, my saving grace, he wrote the wrong citation number on the ticket. And when that happens, I learned that the ticket is null and void. But that was probably the ultimate low that I've ever experienced in my life, is getting to that point where I'm like, I was mortified. And I thought that was the end of it for me. And I realized it was real easy to get in that situation, but coming out of it was way harder. To now, if I want to get my license, you have to pay a fee because this happened. You get this, you have to pay a fee for everything. So something that maybe was a $500 mistake ended up being a $1,500 thing to get out of. And when you have no money, $1,500 is a lot of money. And it seems like the end of the world. And it was a bear to dig myself out of that. And one of the hardest things I've ever done. And that, quite honestly, is what has been driving me ever since. And it's also given me comfort because I know what the bottom feels like. I know what it feels like to be mortified, to be arrested in front of the high school that you're working at, and being in that situation. And the biggest thing that I learned is you have to stay in the system. And it could be daunting for like an early instructor, someone that's teaching band for the first time, someone that's in that contractor position. But you have to find someone that knows how to manage money. Don't expect you're going to know how to do tax law right away, and because you just don't. And there's always this misconception that like as a young, struggling artist or teacher or whatever that you do, you don't get a money manager or you don't get a financial advisor until you made it. Once you made it, then you get a financial advisor because they got to tell me what to do with all the money that I have. You need it when you don't have any money. That's when you need a financial advisor. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're rich, like who cares? You'll figure it out. Like hopefully, but when you're younger, that's when you need that. So that's a hard sell for a lot of people. That's a really hard sell to like, maybe it's going to cost me a couple bucks, but I'll tell you a trick of doing that doesn't cost you any money. And that's bartering. And that's something that I learned how to do really early on. Like in that time, I had no insurance. I had no health insurance. So I remember having to get like dental work done. I had to get new glasses and go to the doctor, but I didn't have health insurance. And that would cost me thousands of dollars. So I found the doctor that had a kid that played trombone in band that needed lessons. So I was like, hey, I'll give Johnny lessons if you take care of my glasses. So I was like, all right, we worked out a deal and literally signed a contract. Like, hey, I'm going to teach 10 lessons and that's going to equal the amount of your services. And I found those people and I still do that stuff to this day and more within my own industry now. But that was a great way to get started. So if anybody is like kind of starting off in that position where, you're unsure of how to manage your money, because there's things that you need to do. You get a check for $500. You don't own that $500 if it's a 1099 thing. You have to pay your taxes. You have to pay quarterly. And if you get behind on those things, and tax is a whole nother thing. Like there's two inevitable things in life, and that's taxes and death. And if you're uncomfortable with both of those, you're going to live in anxiety for the rest of your life. So you have to figure out how to get comfortable with it and get in the system. That's I always have this conversation with my dad because we went through this and he's been a great influence and help over the years. And we always say like, it's a shame when you see people fall out of the system. And that's how people end up homeless. People end up in these real dire situations because of little small decisions over time that compound. And if you just have to stay on top of those little small things to stay in the system, to stay current with whether you like it or not, you have to do it if you want to be successful and just be able to maintain yourself. And I think any young instructor, in the marching arts, that's the biggest thing, that you all get paid. None of you are employees. Nobody's paying for your health insurance. Nobody's got money for that stuff. You gotta find that person to help you, or barter to get those people to help you out, because if not, you can end up in a really, rough situation. And mine maybe is not the norm, but I know there's also a lot of people out there that are too afraid to say these bad things that have happened to them, but it's happened. Like they've been in bad situations, aren't going to talk about how their license was suspended or all these different things, but it happens all over the place. There's a lot of people that teach band that drive looking in the rearview mirror, making sure there's not a cop behind them, checking their tag. You know what I'm saying? So like, and I'm just saying it's nothing that has to do with band, but it just has to do with how you get paid. you know, and they're not taking taxes out, they're not taking that Social Security out and things like that, and learning how that works. I wish I learned that in school. If they taught it, maybe they did teach it. I just wasn't paying attention.
You were thinking about drum corps.
Yeah, I was too in the other direction.
Yeah.
But I had to learn it the hard way. And now that I know it, it's, you know, it's my life. I feel like I can breathe now. It's like I have this weight off my chest, and that if you have that weight on your chest, like just get it off as soon as you can, because that stress is not good for you, man. It lose your hair and like get gray in the beard and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I love that, man, because there's so many levels and layers to that, man. And like you went into even just paying your taxes quarterly, like what those specific things are and what you just said too. And I love that because it's real. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no sugarcoating it. That's exactly what it is. And there's so many people that fall into that potential trap, you know? And if you don't have a plan, and if you don't know exactly what you're trying to do to get out of it, knowing it's going to be harder, you're going to be stuck in there forever.
Yep. Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned when I was doing the 1099 life was, wait a minute, sweet, I have $500. No, you don't. And I didn't know. And then tax time rolls around and you owe all this money and you're wondering why. Well, you didn't pull it out and pay it quarterly, or however you want to do it, or at least set it aside so that when that bill comes in, you're not scrambling for that money.
Yeah.
That's such an important lesson for anybody who has a 1099. You need to get on that.
Yeah, and you got to stay in the system, like Bill was saying, and you got to create your own system within the system and do that consistently, man. I love how you put that.
Yeah.
And ask people for help. Like there's people that have gone through that. If you're in that position, message me. Like, hey, like, what do you do? Like, what's the best way? And you'll find that at least in this industry, everybody is so welcoming to like bringing up the next generation. Yeah. You can't be afraid to ask. And that's always something, to me, one of the biggest things of like building a career. And I learned that from Drew Tucker. He's not afraid to ask anybody for anything. Like he will go out there and ask for the gig, like, hey, put me on it. I want to be this person. And you have to have that mentality. And whether it's like asking for a gig, like, hey, you need a tuba player and I'm your guy. Okay, cool. Or like, hey, like, can you please help me? I noticed that, you know, you seem to have it together, or you know, reaching out for help from a tax person, an accountant, or someone who runs a small business in the area. Because that's what you are. You're a small business owner, you're self-employed, you're a sole proprietor, you have a DBA, whatever it is, you are that person, and you have to figure out the business end. And that's why I mentioned earlier, is like branching out of the genre of things that you're normally in. Like if I just focused on tuba, I'd never learn any of that stuff. But I have to learn the same skills that a business owner who owns like a donut shop down the street, I have to know those same things, because their business model is very similar in how you stay afloat and how you stay in the system, like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I
really,
love that.
really important.
I love that, because then you end up developing ways to beat the system. But without being in it and staying in it, you can't find those hacks that actually make the rich rich, that make the successful actually successful.
Yeah.
Nailed it, dude.
That's definitely the next layer. Yeah, for sure.
Piggybacking off of that insurance and taxes talk, like what would be some tips for people, you know, trying to build a business, build a brand, really think about this taxes stuff, and like get into maybe some passive revenue or ways to develop revenue that aren't necessarily what we're used to in our everyday lives?
I go back to two things. It's one, finding where the issue is and finding the need. I'll give you a couple examples that relate to me, because I can't explain it. Everybody's example is going to be different. But one of the first things I did is I wrote a book. And it wasn't, you know, people think, oh my gosh, you wrote a book, that like seems so daunting, and like who does that? But it was really simple. And the reason I wrote it is because I was on tour, and when I got off tour, I wanted to have a bunch of private lesson students. And what am I going to give these students? Like, all right, each kid's got to get the Arbens book, they got to get the Rochu book, they got to get all these things to study out of. Like, why don't I just give them my book? It would be way easier for me to teach if I just wrote all of that stuff down that I already know. So that's literally what I did. I just was up on the bus and I'm just writing all this stuff down I know. And then I got into it. I'm like, maybe I should organize this and I should really dive in. And I did the research and I figured out how to produce it and how to publish a book. And that was it. That was like my first passive revenue stream of like, okay, the book. Now for me, it's more of like online learning. And, I did this tuba course I released a month or so ago. And, that was a great opportunity for tuba players. And it was a great opportunity for me as well, for many different reasons. But it's something that probably took me maybe 3 weeks to a month to really put together. But it's something that like I can go to bed at night and I wake up in the morning. I was like, oh, I got a couple people that just signed up for the course, overnight. And I wasn't doing anything. And that's where it's really at. It's getting away from that like hand to mouth lifestyle and trying to find those moments of passive income. But it's also important to spread that out as far as you can. And I actually did a clinic, a master class last month to a bunch of students in Portugal that I was fortunate enough to work with. And we were talking about business. They're asking about business. And I did this chart and I was showing how, your average career, you basically follow this straight line. And it's like you do these things. And if you're in a job, for instance, if you work for, I don't know, say you work for Amazon and you're like in a corporate office and you're doing things, maybe not so much like, someone who's working on the floor, but you're in a corporate position. At any given point in time, that position could just disappear and be gone. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And for me, like being able to branch out and do a little bit of this and do a little bit of that. If one thing disappears, it's not the end of the world. And, I think for a lot of young kids coming up, when you decide to do something for a living that is as scary as playing the tuba or being a freelance music teacher or being a dance instructor or whatever it is, when you decide to do that, it's really difficult, especially for parents to see that because they don't see a path. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like there's not like, oh, you want to be a doctor? These are the things you do. You're going to get into over $100,000 in debt, but that's cool because little Johnny's going to be a doctor someday and we're okay with that. But God forbid if you say, I want to be a professional tuba player and you're a year down the road and you have $1,000 on a credit card, like you're the runt of the family. You know what I mean? Like, so those are the things that, I really want to give the next generation an idea of what a viable path can be and what it look. Can I show you guys something real quick?
Please.
Can I show you something?
He's just dropping gems. Let's go.
Let me show you something. I'm just going to show you this because
MVP exclusive, y'all.
This is super important to me, and I wish someone did something like this when I was younger. Because this is honestly the biggest thing that I struggle with early on is like, what is the career path? Whatever you do, what is your path? And check this out. If you guys can see this, typical career path, you go to high school, right? You leave high school, you go to college, you go do your training, you get a job, maybe you get a better job, you get a promotion, and then you get this, what they call job security. You know what I'm saying? You get this job security and it's not secure because you have this one job and something like a pandemic comes around and they decide that you're not a valuable employee or they can't afford you and that's gone. And it's a really sad and unfortunate thing that's happening right now that's taking a toll on everywhere. And that's your typical career path. But as a freelance artist, as a contractor, as someone who's self-employed, you have an opportunity to build a much stronger career. And this is something I wish I knew early on. And I'm going to show you something that looks a little crazy, but I'm going to show you my path. So this was me and high school, like this is early years, high school band, did college band, I did drum corps, and all that kind of boosts me on the gig scene. Now, unknowingly at the time, all these things were seeds of like future career opportunities to come. The high school band brought in different things, the drum corps, the college experience, the gig scene. But this all pointed me to Blast, like I talked about, which was kind of that door that opened me up to a lot of different things. And then from Blast, I got a little bit more recognition, teaching gigs. I started writing music. I got the book. I started performing. I started to meet different people, like key holders, like
Yeah.
as a young person coming up, you have to find those key holders. One of the first people for me was my friend Mike Minio. Like I remember he was the first person I've ever recorded with professionally, and he was a key holder that opened me up to a lot of different names, and opened me up to my friend Brent, who co-produced my first album, and did that as a friend for very little money because of that connection. Drew was another key holder. And you know, my friend Chloe I play with. You have to find these key holders. You don't have to have all the connections. You just have to know someone who will open you up and be your spokesperson for that. But then it opened me up for more gigs, more teaching things, more opportunities, more people that I met. You know, through that, I was able to get that State Department gig, and, you know, work with someone like James Francis, who also played in the Roots, subbed in the Roots. And then because I met him, I kind of got in touch with the tuba player in the Roots, and I show up at a concert at the Roots, and he's like, "Hey, Bill, what's up?" I'm in the audience, and I was like, all because of these connections, you know what I'm saying? And then all that stuff on that side of it feeds the teaching end. You know, if you look, Seminole High School, Stoneman Douglas, like there's all a lot of random things, but it all starts to feed each other as it goes on. And you'll see here, there's like, it looks crazy, but those are like my gigs. And if one of them disappears, it's going to be okay. If like one connection disappears, yeah, don't get me wrong, during COVID, like I'm feeling the pain like anybody else, but I could be worse off. It could be much worse, but this is like a career path of someone who is self-employed. And if you were to show your parents this, and you know, if I were to show my parents this when I was young, it would almost seem crazy, but this is all 100% true, because this is literally my career path. I almost thought about sending this out. Anytime someone asks for a resume, I'll send out a flow chart.
That works.
But
awesome.
anyways, that is basically, you know, you have security within your career. So don't be afraid to do all the things. Everything has significance. The experience I had in the love for high school band keeps me in high school band, and keeps me writing marching band shows. And those are a big part of my career. And that diversity, I'm going to show you one more slide here. This is actually like a snapshot. I did a snapshot for 1 month of where my income came from. And most people see me as like a tuba player or a teacher, but you'll see like the gigs were only 7% of my income. Clinician work, 29%. Some of it's royalties. I have deposits for different booking things, commissions. If any one of those goes, am I going to feel it? Yeah, I'm going to feel it, but it's not going to destroy me. It's not like having one job that takes up the entire chart. So for me, that type of security, I was unknowingly building that for a lot of years. And it wasn't until looking back where I realized, like, I have this level of security now, and it's okay. And you can't get complacent with that, because you have to keep on, you know, fostering those connections. It's not just like, all right, I got this connection. Each one of those is a friendship, and a meaningful friendship. It has to be real. It has to be sincere. But any of those people can call at any point in time, be like, hey, I need a tuba player. I need a producer. Hey, can you do this for this, or do this for this? And that chart is so diverse. Everything from high school marching band to, like, you know, working with the State Department and all over the place. So, but that's the key, man. It's like diversity in your career will build the strength in your career. And man, I wish someone showed me that kind of thing when I was younger. Or I want to hand that to like a couple of high school guidance counselors and be like, look, if you ever get a band kid that is like a C average student, and like, what do you do? Like the normal thing that the guidance counselor would say, well, you're C average student. Why don't you go to community college, you know, get your AA, and then, you know, you go to school, because you assume like, all right, well, he's bad at school, but he'll magically be great in college. Like, what do you do? But, you know, there's so many different opportunities available out there, and, you know, either you see them or you don't see them. And if you don't see them, you have to create those opportunities for yourself.
Yeah. I love that.
I feel like you just created another opportunity for yourself, because you should be going into high schools and giving some talks to juniors and seniors. And because, you know, guidance counselors have a ton of knowledge in certain areas, but unless they were a musician themselves, and probably they weren't, because they're a guidance counselor, you know, you have something to offer these students that they're frankly not going to find in most places. So just something to think about.
Yeah.
You know, that would be super helpful for a lot of kids.
Yeah,
Totally.
I love that stuff. And, you know, it all comes honestly from mistakes that I've made. And I'm the guy that has to learn it the hard way, as you saw from that example that I talked about earlier. But when you learn things the hard way, like, you never forget them. You ain't making that same mistake again twice.
And you don't want other people to have to go through that.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and I see, because I love this activity, because I love what I'm involved in, I see people that are doing the same things that I'm doing, and I want to make sure that they get the information that they need to be successful, and maybe shave a couple years of like heartache off in the process.
And that's literally the purpose of this podcast. You know, it's that post drum corps life. Whether you're in the game or out of the game, whatever you do, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah.
What are some steps that you could learn from so that you can accelerate your version of what this is?
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
so cool. Man, and that map was everywhere.
Yeah. Definitely not a straight line.
No.
It just it gave me a flashback of all the stuff we used to collaborate with too, because even that just has so many facets and so many realms to it, whether it's program coordinating over here, that's this bill, or I am writing drill over there, or collaborating with you in the studio somewhere doing something completely different and off the common path. And you're right, that pie chart was like the perfect glimpse of what it actually is. Because someone hears passive income and probably like, yeah, Bill, what are you doing to go sit on the beach and, you know, drink a Corona and just like hang out? That's not, passive income isn't made on the beach in Jamaica. You know, it's hustling, it's going and writing the book, it's going and getting in that small debt to hopefully make it maximize on the other side of it, you know?
Yeah.
Here's my recommendation for anybody in that situation. Write something down like I did. It could be small, but write down just a picture of, like, on a piece of paper, what are your skill sets? What are the things that you've done? Like, all right, I was an all-state player, or I did this, and write those down. And in each one of those, make like a little pie chart off of that, or not a pie chart, but just branch down and say, like, okay, I was an all-state trumpet player. All right, what can I do with that? Well, there's kids today that want to be all-state trumpet players. I know what it takes to get to that. That's a value. I can sell that. And then you write down all these little things that you do. And to me, all those things are leverage, and you have to be able to leverage that, and you have to know how to present that to people and to sell yourself to people. And I think sometimes you're worth a lot more than you realize, because a lot of the things on that chart I discount. I say, oh, it's just a little thing here, or it's just a little thing here. But to some people, that little thing is a really big thing. And everybody's got some skill sets that, you know, you take for granted. And I do this as a teacher all the time. Like, oh, this is a simple thing. This is just a breathing exercise. Everybody knows this. No, not everybody knows this stuff. And you can't take any of those things for granted. So no matter how small, like, write that stuff down and then branch off of that and figure out what you can do to better those situations. So instead of looking at it as like, all right, yeah, this is a problem area and there's a need and I'm going to sell that need. Yeah, that's the business aspect of it. But even before you think about making money, just think about how you can make all those things better. Like, what can you do to make that better? And the money will come, because the money was never the first thing in the conversation in any of those gigs. I've never been hired for a gig. It's rare that someone says, like, hey, this is how much you're going to get paid, and you're going to do this. That conversation comes later, you know, and in terms of keeping jobs too, you know, your talent gets you in the door. Not being a jerk and being a cool person and being reliable is what keeps you in the door.
What value do you actually bring? That's the truth right there.
Yeah, I mean, and people hire people for security. You know, you might know someone from, like, hey, I need this dancer. He's really great, and he's going to be perfect for the show. And there's this other guy who's almost as good, maybe a little bit younger, not as experienced, but I'm going to go with this younger guy because this other guy is always late and never shows up on time and never does those things. This young guy, I think he's hungry. He wants it. And
dude, that's literally how we've built our careers, you know.
For
there was a certain point where it's like, well, I'm making more money voice acting than I am with writing drill this year. Like, because we made the pie chart, we actually wrote it down and say, whoa, maybe this is a whole nother avenue of our income that we didn't even realize was a skill set of ours that other people would pay for, but not realizing we're that jack of all trades inside that organization that, well, Eddie can collaborate with Bill and talk about the music, but he can also get on the drum and talk about what the effect of that is, but also emotionally, literally do the narration and portray exactly what we're trying to do. So I might have been that younger guy, but I was on time. I was able to do 5 different things, and the guy that was always late, he's just like, well, sorry, bruh, but we
Yeah.
got somebody else in here now.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how far you can go just by those simple things that have nothing to do with your actual talent and abilities. Being
Yeah.
on time, not being a jerk, like being a kind person, being easy to get
Yes.
along with, always having like a learning mindset, not coming in like I know everything and
Yeah.
listen to me. Those things alone can get you the next gig. So I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. What are some, besides that, what are some things that you can do or that you've personally done to get those repeat customers, the repeat business?
Keep them coming back.
Yeah.
How do you keep them coming back, Bill?
So to me, you have to do more than what you get paid for. You always have to do more, and you have to create a need. You have to bring something that people didn't realize they needed, and once you give it to them, they want it. Like the new iPhone. When the first iPhone came out, people are like, "This is ridiculous. We don't need this." And then like now they drop a new iOS 14's out. Gotta download it right now. Like everybody freaks out. So you have to find those things. And for me, like it was things like, I'll give you an example. Remember when we were touring with Blast, each month or like in the beginning of a tour, they would give you like a calendar, and the calendar said all the places that we were going. And I remember it said like the drive is going to be 8 hours, and the temperature high is 67 degrees and the low is 62 degrees. Well, you know, in touring I went on a lot of tours with Drew Tucker and the New Standard as a group as their music director. And the reason I was a music director is because every time that we went on a tour, I would do that same thing. I would plot out like, okay, here's what we're doing at this time. I would make a flow chart. Here's what we're going. I know we're going up to Pittsburgh, and Claudens is terrible in the cold, and it's snowing in Pittsburgh. So I'm going to put the temperature on there so he knows to bring a jacket. I'm going to make sure he has a jacket. And I know Drew always forgets to bring an extra 1/4 inch for this instrument that he wants to play. So I'm going to put a couple extra 1/4 inch cables in my bag and make sure that he's taken care of. And I've always been that person to, you know, and some people say like it's for my own self-preservation, because it's like I hate getting into situations where it's like, we're messed over, we're missing this cable, or this person's in distress, and I don't like being in those situations. So, you know, and that helps with my own personal anxiety, is controlling all the variables. So that was something that I always brought to the table. Like if I was doing a gig with someone, they always knew that I had the extra cables. They always knew that like I had everything planned out. And, you know, I never thought I was the best tuba player or best bass player, but that's the stuff to me that always gets me hired back, is because I don't get paid extra to do that stuff, but, you know, people know if they're going to hire me, they're going to get a little bit more than they maybe potentially would get, and a little bit extra service. And I try to figure out how to do that in everything that I do. If I'm writing a marching band show, I'm not just going to give them the sheet music. I'm going to spend an extra few hours just trying to make that MIDI file not sound like a MIDI file. I'm going to make it sound like it's the real thing, as close to I can, because that's that little bit of that sells that product. And everything that you do, it's that extra little bit that you can put in that you don't get paid for, that builds your value. And I tell you what, every time I go on tour right now, everybody's expects that. They're like, all right, where's Bill's spreadsheet? I know Bill's got a spreadsheet. We know it's going to take 8 hours to get to New Orleans, and then this is where we're staying in New Orleans, and he's got it all figured out. And people expect that, and that's why, for me, I get the repeat business. And like I said earlier, you know, you can't be a jerk. You have to be nice. And ultimately, and I think you said it, Paula, you have to be able to kind of humble yourself and bring yourself down in certain situations. Like as an instructor, this is something a lot of us go through. When you're young and you're working for another band program that's not yours, and you're not the band director, know that you are not the top dog in charge. And sometimes you have to put your tail between your legs. And even if you think you know that something that's better than that director's doing, well, that director has that job and you're working for them, and you need to just humble yourself and say, cool, I appreciate that, and take it on the nose. And that's something that it's taken me a long time to learn, but you build more valuable friendships that way. If I were to go in and just bulldog my way and say, hey, this is not how you do a lip slur, it needs to be done this way, you don't accomplish anything. Yeah. But, you know, if you say, cool, I like the way you did that, Mind if I try something else? Like tomorrow, I want to try this, and you start to develop that rapport, and you develop a friendship.
It's all about relationships
I
right
would,
there.
yeah. In music, the hang lasts longer than the music. You know, you only play a 2-hour set. And then you're on the road the whole rest of the time. So you don't hire the people that are the best on the bandstand. You hire the people that are best off of the bandstand. The people you wouldn't mind being in a car with for hours and hours. The people that like, hey, I'm going on the road with this person, and I like going on the road with Drew because he's also married. He has a family. And I know when we're on the road, we're going to keep each other and hold each other to a certain standard and not just go crazy. You know what I'm saying? So it's all those other things that have nothing to do with your talent, have nothing to do with how you play or how you do your job. It's all the little extra stuff that requires no talent, to me, that builds the repeat business.
Yeah.
I love that. I love those relationships, man, because it really is a small world too. You know, there's a lot of people doing a lot of the same things. It's about the relationships you build and what that means for the future.
Yeah.
Like having collaborated with you guys at the West Browards, or even now with, even Patrick and Josh at Park Vista, like there's 3 big visual guys there, but we all work, and it's all such a great relationship because we bring completely different experiences to the table, and the hang is what it's all about. I've known them for 15 plus years.
And a mutual respect for each other and what we're all about.
And we can't wait to bring each other to the next gig, whatever those things are, because we know what we can build together.
And it's also like, going on the relationship thing, how many gigs have we all gotten for each other because, hey, we need a tuba player. Hey, I know this guy. He's awesome, blah, blah, blah.
And I can
then
count
I call
on
you
him.
and
I'm going to pause you there, Paula. For the record, Paula got me one of the funniest gigs ever. Man, she found a gig on Craigslist. She called me. So this is totally sidebar. We're going off track.
Please.
Paula calls me one day and is like, hey, I found this gig on Craigslist. They said they're looking for a tuba player. It's probably fake, but like, here's the number. Maybe you should call it. It could be interesting. I call this number, and I end up playing for Gloria Estefan's daughter's quinceañera. And we're playing in Gloria Estefan's club, and I was the tuba player. And like, we're playing in front of the biggest bowl of paella that I have ever seen in my life. And this was a gig that Paula was like, this is some random thing on Craigslist that was advertised. And that was like, and I met a lot of musicians on that day that I still stay in touch with to this day. From that opportunity. But that's the kind of stuff, like, you never know those things, and you were just happen to see that, and we're like, hey, I'm gonna help you out, Bill. Here's something. It's probably whatever, and it ended up being a really fun, interesting. It paid well, and it was like a really funny story to this day of like, hey, I found a gig playing in Gloria Estefan's daughter's party on Craigslist.
And to tie it all together, had you been a jerk to Paula at some point in whatever relationship you guys had prior to that moment, would she have called you? Would you have that story? Not. Would you be invited on this podcast to tell this dope story right now?
Right.
That's what it's all about, guys. Relationships and that truly builds longevity, Bill. And you have been the one that really has shown this is what longevity really looks like. And it's not this passive sitting on the beach kind of thing. It might look glamorous, but there's a lot of work, a lot of hustle, and a lot of execution going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like the duck paddling under the water underneath, but with smooth sailing on
smooth
top.
Bill
on top.
so
much work going on behind the scenes.
Still waters run deep, man. That's where it's at.
Knowing what you know now, if you could travel in a time machine and talk to that specific Bill that was going through that hard time, that like the going in that rabbit hole and all that stuff, if you can go back and talk to that version of yourself, what tips would you give, or what would you say to either motivate or get them out of that situation, get yourself out of that situation?
Man, that's a good one. There's a lot I would tell that to.
Yeah.
I tell you what, if that 20-year-old self came up to me, I would not want to hang out with that guy. He was obnoxious. But I think the big thing is I would just like stop worrying about what everybody else thinks. And I think as you get older, you start to realize that, when you're young and you're in school and in grade school, you worry so much about what everybody else thinks because it's such a judgmental environment. And you see these kids that like don't blossom till years later, because you can almost see this kid that like gets beat up in school and then, you know, has all these things, but you can, as an adult, you can see all the beautiful characteristics in this person that is just going to flourish someday. And I spent a lot of time younger just worrying about what everybody else thinks, to my own demise, and building my own anxiety, my own insecurities. And that fostered a lot of the behavior that I was like, oh, I have to have this. If I have this, because everybody else has this, and I have to do this. And that caused financial hardships, and that caused a lot of other things. And then as you get older, it's like, stop worrying about what everybody else thinks. You can't make everybody happy. And if you try, you're going to just make everybody not happy. You know, there's going to be people that don't like you, and that's okay. And there's people that I've been crappy to in the past, and that's what I was. And, you know, you just have to move on. But like I don't mean that to be like, oh, just be a jerk to everybody. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks. It's more of just, you know, stop comparing yourself. Comparison is the thief of joy. You know, you just have to be yourself, and you have to ride that journey and know that like you're going to gain perspective at some point, even if you don't have it right now.
And even if it's the hard way. That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I love that.
That was great. We could just keep going on for 3 hours, Joe Rogan style.
Yeah,
but let's,
there's got to be another one, though, because this is just pockets, folks. There's so many other gems.
You guys got a cool premise, man. Hitting all like the important things.
They all tie
It's funny
in.
because when I first saw like the name, I was like, oh, that's cool. I get it. And then like when I saw what you're doing, I was like, oh, I get it. Pockets. All right. Like,
Nice.
you know, all the different aspects of it. It's so awesome.
Thanks, dude.
Appreciate
And thanks for
it.
doing this, man. And you're like the perfect person to show that side of it, the freelance side of all these things, because you're, one, extremely successful, but two, not afraid to try new things and forge a new path for others. So thanks for doing that, man.
That's the biggest thing about you that I love and respect so much, is you're always looking for ways to improve, or what's the newest, freshest thing. I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this now. And you're just always like searching for ways to get better. And I love it. And it shows in your success. So kudos to you. Yeah.
And it's not like you're sporadic either. It's just like you're adding things to your arsenal.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
Exactly.
Keep it up,
Thanks,
brother.
guys.
What else you got going on? So where can we find more of you? Like, what's going on in Bill's world? I know it's crazy with COVID, but we want to know how we can participate. How can we follow? How can we be a
support
part of what you're doing and
Sure.
see what you're doing?
So you can find me everywhere if you just type in Tuba Visionary, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. That's kind of the reach. I haven't branched into the dark side of the younger social
TikTok
media outlets.
for
But
you? No? Okay. All right.
TikTok
We'll
yet.
be,
But if you
we'll
look
be
up,
waiting for that.
yeah, Tuba Visionary, tubavisionary.com. That's all of the things. My project right now, coming out in the next few months, is I did a course on the modern tuba, which was like showing tuba players how to play tuba like a bass player and get gigs doing that. My next course is a course that's improvisation for classical musicians, which will be really cool because, as you know, like you guys know me well, I came up kind of classically trained and had to learn how to improvise in the fire and didn't get that training in high school. And so I come about it like a different way. So anyways, long story short, that's a new course that I'll have coming out with, it won't be a month long like my prior course. It'll be more like a shorter course. But that'll be coming up in the next month or so.
Yeah, that's so needed.
Smart. Find
So
the gaps, find the problems,
Yep.
sell the solution.
There it is.
Boom.
We hope you enjoyed part 2 of The Real Life of a Freelance Musician with Bill Muter. You can follow Bill on social media at Tuba Visionary and on his website, tubavisionary.com. Follow our podcast on Instagram at Mind, Body, and Pockets, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for video episodes and bonus clips. If our content has been bringing you value, please go ahead and rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts. This is going to help us build our community and reach more people in the marching arts and beyond, so we'd really appreciate it if you could help us out. Thanks for the support, and as always, keep taking steps to level up your life.